The bullet grazed her shoulder as Helena Morgan dove behind the water trough outside the Terlingua General Store, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on this August afternoon in 1882, and the dust kicked up by the gunfire hung in the air like a dirty curtain. She pressed her hand against the wound, feeling the warm blood seep between her fingers, and wondered how her life had come to this moment, hiding from men who wanted her dead for witnessing something she wished she could unsee. 3 days ago, she had been walking home from her job at the millinery shop when she saw Mayor Hutchins and his brother drag a man into the alley behind the saloon. She should have kept walking. She should have minded her own business like every sensible woman in this dried-up corner of West Texas did. But she had heard the man pleading for his life, and something in her would not let her just walk away. She had crept closer, peering around the corner just in time to see the mayor's brother put a bullet in the man's head, and they had seen her. They had looked right at her with those cold eyes, and she had run. Now they were hunting her like an animal, and the sheriff was the mayor's cousin, so there would be no help from the law. Helena squeezed her eyes shut and tried to think. The next town was 40 miles away across brutal desert terrain, and she had no horse, no water, and nowhere to hide. Terlingua was barely more than a collection of adobe buildings and weathered wood structures clustered around the cinnabar mines, with maybe 200 souls calling it home. Everyone knew everyone, and most of them knew better than to cross the Hutchins family. Another bullet splintered the wood above her head, and she heard boots crunching on the gravel. They were getting closer. She was 23 years old, and she was going to die in the dirt behind a water trough, and no one would even question the story they would tell about her. Then she heard a voice, low and steady, cutting through the chaos like a knife through butter. "That is far enough, gentlemen." Helena risked a glance around the trough and saw a man standing in the middle of the street, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. He wore dusty riding clothes and had a rifle held casually in his hands, but there was nothing casual about the way he held himself. Every line of his body spoke of coiled danger, of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of and was not afraid to use it. "This is not your concern, stranger," one of the mayor's men called out. "The woman is a thief. We are bringing her to justice." "Funny thing about that," the stranger said, and his voice carried a hint of amusement that seemed wildly out of place. "I just rode in from El Paso, and I heard tell that Mayor Hutchins is the one doing the thieving. Mining claims that do not belong to him, money disappearing from the town coffers. And now, I come to find armed men chasing down a woman in broad daylight. Makes a man wonder what she knows that has you so worried." "I said this is not your concern," the man repeated, and Helena could hear the threat in his voice now. "Well, I am making it my concern," the stranger said. "The lady is coming with me. You boys can take that up with your boss, and he can find me at the hotel if he wants to discuss it like civilized people." There was a long moment of tense silence, and Helena held her breath. There were 3 of them and only one of him, and she could see them calculating the odds. But something in the stranger's stance must have warned them off, because after a moment they backed away, though not before one of them spat in the dust and said, "This is not over." "It never is," the stranger agreed, and waited until they had disappeared around the corner before he lowered his rifle and turned to Helena. "You can come out now, miss. They are gone." Helena emerged from behind the trough on shaky legs, still pressing her hand to her bleeding shoulder. Now that she could see him properly, she realized he was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 27 or 28. He had strong features weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that curled slightly under his hat, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-green, like the ocean she had seen once as a child when her family still lived in Galveston. "You are bleeding," he said, and his voice had lost that edge of amusement. He stepped forward, and she instinctively stepped back. "I am fine," she said, though the world was starting to tilt in an alarming way. "You are not fine," he said patiently. "You are losing blood, and it is 100 degrees out here, and I would bet money you have not eaten or drunk anything since this morning. So why don't you stop being stubborn and let me help you before you pass out in the street?" Helena wanted to argue, but the truth was that her vision was starting to blur around the edges, and her legs felt like they were made of water. She swayed, and suddenly his arm was around her waist, strong and steady, holding her upright. "I have got you," he said quietly. "What is your name?" "Helena," she managed. "Helena Morgan." "Helena," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her name sound like music. "I am Asher Cole. Can you walk?" "I think so," she said, though she was not entirely sure. "Good. My horse is just down the street. We are going to get you somewhere safe, and then we are going to take care of that shoulder, and then you are going to tell me what in the hell you did to make the mayor's men want you dead." He half carried her down the street to where a beautiful bay gelding stood waiting, reins hanging loose. The horse did not even flinch as Asher lifted Helena into the saddle and swung up behind her, gathering her carefully against his chest. She should have protested. She should have demanded to know who he was and why he was helping her. But she was so tired, and his arms felt so safe, and the world was fading to gray around the edges. "Stay with me, Helena," she heard him say, and then everything went dark. When she woke, she was lying on a bed in a room she did not recognize. The walls were rough adobe, and the window was covered with a faded curtain that did little to block the late afternoon sun. Her shoulder throbbed with a steady, burning pain, but when she looked down, she saw that someone had bandaged it neatly. She was wearing her chemise and petticoat, and her dress was draped over a chair in the corner, the bloodstain on the sleeve dark and ominous. "You are awake," said a voice, and she turned her head to see Asher Cole sitting in a chair by the window, his hat on the table beside him. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot," Helena said, and he gave a short laugh. "Fair enough. The bullet just grazed you, but you lost some blood. The doctor said you would be fine with rest and clean bandages. He also said you were lucky." "Lucky," Helena repeated bitterly. "That is an interesting way to describe my current situation." Asher leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You want to tell me what happened? The truth this time, not whatever story those men were trying to sell." Helena studied him carefully. He had an honest face, but she had learned the hard way that faces could lie. Still, he had saved her life, and she owed him something for that. So she told him everything, from witnessing the murder to running for her life, and he listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The man they killed, do you know who he was?" "No," Helena admitted. "I had never seen him before." "His name was Thomas Mercer," Asher said quietly. "He was my partner. We were investigating the mayor for fraud and corruption. Thomas must have gotten too close to something important." Helena felt her stomach drop. "I am so sorry." "It is not your fault," Asher said, but his voice was tight with suppressed emotion. "You tried to help him. That is more than most people would have done." "And now we are both in danger," Helena said. "If they find out you were Thomas's partner, they will kill you too." "They can try," Asher said, and there was steel in his voice now. "But I did not come all this way to turn tail and run at the first sign of trouble. Thomas deserves justice, and so do all the other people the mayor has hurt, and you deserve to be safe." "Safe," Helena said and laughed, though it sounded more like a sob. "I have not been safe since I was a child. My parents died of cholera when I was 14. I have been on my own ever since, moving from town to town, trying to stay ahead of trouble. I thought maybe Terlingua would be different. I thought maybe I could finally stop running and build a life here, but I should have known better. Dreams do not come true, not for people like me. Asher stood and crossed to the bed, sitting down on the edge of it. He looked at her with those startling eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Let me be your exception, Helena." She stared at him. "What? You said dreams do not come true. Let me be the exception that proves you wrong. Let me help you. Let me keep you safe. And when this is all over, maybe you can stop running." "You do not even know me," Helena protested. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" "Because you tried to save my partner when you could have just walked away," Asher said. "Because you are brave and good, and this world needs more people like you. And because the moment I saw you hiding behind that water trough, bleeding and scared but still fighting, I knew I could not just leave you to face this alone." Helena felt tears burning in her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had learned not to cry years ago, because tears did not change anything. They did not bring back the dead or put food on the table or make cruel people kind. But something in Asher's voice made her want to believe him, made her want to trust that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. "Rest tonight," Asher said. "Tomorrow we start gathering evidence against the mayor. If we can prove what he has done, we can bring in the federal marshals and put him away for good. But it is going to be dangerous, Helena. I will not lie to you about that. If you want to take the money I can spare and get on the next stage to El Paso, I will understand." Helena shook her head. "Your partner died because of what I saw. I owe it to him to see this through. And besides, I am tired of running. Maybe it is time I stood and fought." Asher smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and Helena felt her heart do a strange little flip in her chest. "That is my girl," he said, and then seemed to realize what he had said, because he cleared his throat and stood up quickly. "I mean, that is good. That is the right decision. I will let you rest now. I will be in the next room if you need anything." He was almost to the door when Helena said, "Asher," he turned back. "Yes, thank you," she said, "for saving my life." "Thank you for trying to save Thomas's," he said quietly, and then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. Helena lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She barely knew this man, and yet she had agreed to help him take down one of the most powerful men in Terlingua. It was foolish and reckless and probably suicidal. But for the first time in years, she felt something besides fear and exhaustion. She felt hope, and that was more dangerous than any bullet. The next morning, Helena woke to find a tray of food on the table by her bed, fresh bread, eggs, and coffee that actually smelled good. There was also a note in a bold, slanted handwriting. "Eat. You need your strength. I will be back at noon." She ate slowly, savoring every bite. It had been a long time since anyone had taken care of her, and she had forgotten what it felt like. When she was finished, she got up and examined her shoulder in the small mirror on the wall. The bandage was clean and white, and though the wound hurt, it was not as bad as it could have been. She would have a scar, but she had others. What was one more? She dressed carefully in her mended dress and braided her long brown hair, pinning it up the way she had been taught at the orphanage, where she had spent 2 miserable years after her parents died. She looked pale and thin, with dark circles under her hazel eyes, but she was alive, and that was something. Asher returned exactly at noon, carrying a bundle under his arm. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better," Helena said, and it was true. The food and rest had helped, even if her shoulder still ached. "Good. I brought you something." He handed her the bundle, and when she unwrapped it, she found a simple but sturdy riding outfit, split skirt, blouse, and boots. I figured you could not very well help me investigate in a dress that makes you stand out like a sore thumb. These belong to the doctor's daughter, but she moved to San Antonio last year, and he said you could borrow them. Helena ran her hand over the soft cotton fabric. This is too much. You have already done so much for me. It is practical, Asher said firmly. We have work to do, and you need to be able to move freely. Now get changed. We are going to the mining office. The mining office, Helena said, alarmed. But the mayor owns half the mines. It will be crawling with his people. Exactly, Asher said with a grin, which is why they will not expect us to walk right in. Thomas told me before he came to Terlingua that the mayor has been filing false claims on land that belongs to other people. If we can get access to the records, we can prove it. And how exactly do you plan to get access to the records? Helena asked. That is where you come in, Asher said. You are going to distract the clerk while I search the office. You want me to flirt with him, Helena said flatly. I want you to keep him occupied, Asher corrected. How you do that is up to you, but yes, if flirting works, then flirt. Can you do that? Helena thought of the mayor's men and the way they had looked at her like she was already dead. She thought of Thomas Mercer, who she had never met but who had died trying to do the right thing. And she thought of Asher, who had risked his life to save hers and was now trusting her to help him. I can do that, she said. The mining office was a squat building near the edge of town, its windows dusty and its door hanging slightly crooked on its hinges. The clerk was a nervous-looking man with thinning hair and spectacles, and he looked up with a startled expression when Helena walked in, Asher following a few steps behind. Can I help you? The clerk asked, his eyes darting between them. I hope so, Helena said, putting on her brightest smile. My husband and I just arrived in Terlingua, and we are thinking of investing in one of the mines. We heard this is the place to get information about available claims. The clerk blinked. Your husband? Yes, Helena said, looping her arm through Asher's and leaning against him. We were married just last month in El Paso. I know we do not look like much, but my husband has some money saved, and we are looking for a good opportunity. Asher played along smoothly, putting his arm around her waist. That is right. We are particularly interested in claims near the Chizos Mountains. I heard there is good cinnabar there. The clerk looked uncertain. Well, I suppose I could show you some maps, but most of the good claims are already taken. Oh, I am sure we can find something, Helena said, giving him her most dazzling smile. You seem like such a knowledgeable man. I bet you know everything there is to know about mining in this area. The clerk puffed up a little at the compliment. Well, I have been working here for 5 years now. I suppose I do know a thing or two. I would love to hear about it, Helena said, and saw Asher's lips twitch with suppressed amusement. Why do not you tell me about the history of mining in Terlingua while my husband looks at the maps? He is much better with that sort of thing than I am. As the clerk launched into a long-winded explanation of mercury mining, Asher casually moved to the filing cabinets on the far wall and began quietly searching through them. Helena kept the clerk talking, asking questions and laughing at his jokes, all while keeping one eye on Asher. Her heart was pounding, and she half expected the door to burst open at any moment with the mayor's men flooding in. But Asher worked quickly and efficiently, and after about 20 minutes, he gave her a subtle nod. He had found what he was looking for. Well, this has been so informative, Helena said, interrupting the clerk mid-sentence. But I am afraid we have another appointment. We will come back tomorrow to discuss the claims further if that is all right. Of course, the clerk said, looking disappointed. I will be here all day. They left the office and walked quickly down the street, not speaking until they were safely back in the room at the boarding house. Then Asher pulled a sheaf of papers from inside his jacket and spread them out on the table. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "Claim transfers, all signed by the mayor, for land that was originally owned by Mexican families who mysteriously left town right around the time the transfers were filed. And look at the dates. They are all within a week of each other, 3 months ago." Helena leaned over his shoulder, studying the documents. "Do you think he forced them out?" "I would bet my life on it," Asher said grimly. "And look at this one. This claim belonged to a man named Juan Delgado. According to the transfer, he sold it to the mayor for $50. But Thomas wrote to me that he had spoken to Delgado, and Delgado said the mayor's men burned his house down and told him to leave, or they would burn his family too." "That is horrible," Helena whispered. "That is the mayor," Asher said. "He has been doing this for years," Thomas thought, "taking land, intimidating people, making anyone who stands up to him disappear." Thomas was going to testify before a federal judge. That is why they killed him. Helena looked at the papers, at the evidence of so much cruelty and greed, and felt anger burning hot in her chest. "What do we do now?" "Now we find the families the mayor displaced," Asher said. "If we can get even one of them to testify, combined with these documents, we will have enough to bring the marshals in. The problem is finding them. Most of them probably left Texas entirely." "Not all of them," Helena said slowly. "When I worked at the millinery shop, there was a woman who came in sometimes. Mexican woman, maybe 40 years old. She had beautiful embroidery work, and she would sell pieces to the shop owner. Her name was Rosa. She told me once that her family used to own land near the mines, but they lost it. I never asked how, but now I wonder." "You know where she lives?" Asher asked. "She has a small house on the south side of town," Helena said. "I delivered a hat there once, but Asher, if the mayor finds out we are talking to her, he will know what we are doing." "Then we will have to be careful," Asher said. "We will go tonight after dark. Can you take me there?" Helena nodded, though fear was already coiling in her stomach. They were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were life and death. But when she looked at Asher, at the determination in his eyes and the set of his jaw, she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. She barely knew him, but she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in years. And that scared her almost as much as the mayor did. They waited until well after dark, when most of Terlingua was asleep, and the streets were empty except for the occasional drunk stumbling home from the saloon. Helena led Asher through the narrow back streets to a small adobe house with a neat garden in front. She knocked softly on the door, and after a moment it opened a crack, revealing a woman's suspicious face. "Rosa," Helena said. "It is Helena Morgan from the millinery shop. I am sorry to bother you so late, but I need to talk to you. It is important." Rosa's eyes flicked to Asher, and her expression grew wary. "Who is this?" "A friend," Helena said. "Someone who wants to help. Please, Rosa, it is about the mayor and what he did to your family." Rosa's face went pale, but after a moment she opened the door wider. "Come in, quickly." The inside of the house was small but clean, with religious pictures on the walls and the smell of cooking beans in the air. Rosa gestured for them to sit at the small table, and she sat across from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "What do you want?" she asked. "The truth," Asher said gently, "about what happened to your land." Rosa looked down at her hands. "Why, no one cares about what happens to people like us. The mayor can do whatever he wants and no one will stop him." "I want to stop him," Asher said. "My partner died trying to stop him. But I need help. I need someone who can testify to what he has done. Please, Rosa, tell us what happened." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to speak, her voice low and bitter. My family has lived on that land for 3 generations. My grandfather bought it when Texas was still part of Mexico. We had papers, legal papers, proving it was ours. But the mayor said the papers were not valid, that the land belonged to the government now, and he had bought it fair and square. When my husband tried to fight it, the mayor's men came to our house in the middle of the night. They beat my husband so badly he could not walk for a month. They said if we did not leave, they would do worse. They said they would hurt our children. Helena reached across the table and took Rosa's hand. I am so sorry. We had no choice, Rosa continued, tears streaming down her face now. We signed the papers. We took the $50 they offered, even though the land was worth 1,000 times that. And we moved to this little house, and my husband works in the mines now, the mines that should have been ours. He comes home every night covered in dust and coughing, and I know it is killing him, but what can we do? We have 4 children. We need the money. You can testify, Asher said. You can tell a federal judge what the mayor did. With your testimony and the documents we found, we can put him in prison. We can get your land back. Rosa shook her head. You do not understand. The sheriff is his cousin. The judge in the county seat is in his pocket. There is no one to help us. There are federal marshals, Asher said. They do not answer to the mayor. They answer to the government in Washington. If we can prove what he has done, they will come and they will arrest him. But I need you to be brave, Rosa. I need you to stand up and tell the truth. Rosa looked at him for a long moment, and Helena could see the fear and hope warring in her eyes. Finally, she said, if I do this, if I testify, you promise my family will be safe. You promise he cannot hurt us. I promise, Asher said, and the conviction in his voice made Helena believe him. I will protect you and your family with my life if I have to, but we have to do this right. We have to be smart about it. Rosa nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? They spent the next hour going over Rosa's story, with Asher writing down every detail. By the time they left, it was past midnight and the moon was high in the sky. They walked back to the boarding house in silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached Helena's room, Asher hesitated at the door. You were amazing tonight, he said. The way you talked to the clerk, the way you helped Rosa feel safe enough to talk to us. I could not have done this without you. Helena felt heat rising in her cheeks. I just did what needed to be done. You did more than that, Asher said, and he stepped closer, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his blue-green eyes. You were brave and kind and smart, and I think you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Helena's breath caught in her throat. Asher, you barely know me. I know enough, he said softly. I know that you have been hurt and disappointed and let down by the world, but you still tried to save a stranger's life. I know that you could have run away, but you chose to stay and fight. And I know that when I look at you, I feel something I have not felt in a very long time. What do you feel? Helena whispered. Hope, Asher said, and then he cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, and Helena felt something inside her break open, something she had kept locked away for so long she had almost forgotten it was there. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her palms. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Asher rested his forehead against hers and said, I should not have done that. I am sorry. This is not the time or place, and you have been through so much. Do not apologize, Helena said. I wanted you to kiss me. I have wanted you to kiss me since you called me your girl yesterday, even though I know you did not mean it that way. What if I did mean it that way? Asher asked, pulling back to look at her. What if I want you to be my girl, Helena? What if I want to keep you safe and make you smile and prove to you that dreams can come true? Then I would say you are crazy, Helena said, but she was smiling now, really smiling for the first time in days. But maybe I like crazy. Maybe I am tired of being careful and sensible and always expecting the worst. Good, Asher said, and kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, until Helena felt like she was drowning in him, in the taste and smell and feel of him. When he finally pulled away, she made a small sound of protest, and he laughed, low and rough. "If I do not leave now, I am not going to leave at all," he said. "And you need rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "What are we going to do tomorrow?" Helena asked. "We are going to send a telegram to the federal marshals in El Paso," Asher said. "And then we are going to keep our heads down and wait for them to arrive. With any luck, this will all be over in a week, and you can stop running and start living." He kissed her forehead gently and then left, closing the door behind him. Helena stood there for a moment, touching her lips where he had kissed her, and then she laughed out loud. It was a wild, slightly hysterical sound, but she could not help it. She was falling in love with a man she had known for less than 2 days, and they were about to take on one of the most dangerous men in Texas, and she should have been terrified. But instead, she felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. The next morning, they walked to the telegraph office together. It was a bright, hot day, and the streets were busy with miners heading to work and women doing their morning shopping. Asher kept close to Helena, one hand resting protectively on the small of her back, and she felt her heart swell with affection for him. The telegraph operator was a wizened old man with a handlebar mustache, and he looked up suspiciously when they entered. "Help you?" "I need to send a telegram to the federal marshal's office in El Paso," Asher said, sliding a few coins across the counter. The operator's eyes narrowed. "What kind of telegram?" "The kind that is none of your business," Asher said pleasantly. "Are you going to send it, or do I need to report to your superiors that you are interfering with official communications?" The operator grumbled but pulled out a form. "Fine. What is the message?" Asher dictated carefully. "Evidence of fraud and murder in Terlingua. Request immediate assistance. Will provide witness testimony and documentation. Asher Cole." The operator wrote it down and then tapped it out on the telegraph machine, the clicking sound filling the small office. When he was done, he said, "Anything else?" "That will be all," Asher said, and they left quickly. Outside, Helena said, "How long do you think it will take for them to respond?" "A day, maybe 2, Asher said. "The question is whether we can stay hidden that long. The mayor knows we are asking questions, and he is going to come for us." As if in answer to his words, they heard the sound of breaking glass from the direction of the boarding house. Asher grabbed Helena's hand and pulled her into the narrow alley between 2 buildings, pressing them both against the wall. A moment later, 3 of the mayor's men ran past, heading toward the boarding house. "They are searching for us," Helena breathed. "We need to get out of town," Asher said. "Right now, can you ride?" "Yes," Helena said, though her injured shoulder was throbbing. "Good. My horse is at the livery stable. We are going to get him and ride out to the Chizos Mountains. There are caves there where we can hide until the marshals arrive." They moved quickly through the back streets, avoiding the main roads. The livery stable was run by an old Mexican man who took one look at Asher's face and asked no questions. He saddled the bay gelding and handed Asher a canteen and a sack of supplies. "Good luck, amigo," he said quietly. Asher tossed him a silver dollar and swung into the saddle, pulling Helena up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held on tight as he urged the horse into a gallop, racing out of town toward the rugged mountains in the distance. They rode hard for an hour, the horses' hooves kicking up clouds of dust on the desert trail. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Helena could feel sweat soaking through her clothes. But she did not complain. She just held onto Asher and trusted him to get them to safety. Finally, they reached the foothills of the Chizos Mountains, and Asher slowed the horse to a walk, guiding them up a narrow, rocky path. The terrain was treacherous, with loose stones and sharp drops, but the horse moved with sure-footed confidence, and after another half-hour they reached a small cave hidden behind a screen of juniper trees. Asher dismounted and helped Helena down, and they led the horse into the cave. It was cool and dim inside, with a sandy floor and walls stained dark with minerals. Near the back, there was evidence that someone had camped here before: blackened stones from a fire pit and a few empty tin cans. "We should be safe here for a few days," Asher said, unsaddling the horse. "The cave goes back pretty far, so we will have shelter if it rains, and there is a spring about a quarter-mile down the canyon where we can get water." Helena sat down on a flat rock and let out a long breath. "This is really happening, is not it? We are fugitives now." "Only until the marshals arrive," Asher said, sitting down beside her. "And then the mayor will be the fugitive, not us." "You make it sound so simple," Helena said. "It is simple," Asher said. "We stay alive, we wait for help, and we make sure the bad guys pay for what they have done. The hard part is the waiting." He was right about that. The next 3 days were the longest of Helena's life. They spent the daylight hours inside the cave, only venturing out after dark to get water and forage for firewood. Asher showed her how to set snares for rabbits, and they ate simple meals cooked over a small fire that they were careful to keep hidden from view. It should have been miserable, but somehow it was not. In the quiet darkness of the cave, with only the sound of the wind and the occasional call of a coyote, Helena and Asher talked about everything. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Colorado, about learning to ride before he could walk, about his mother who died when he was 10 and his father who drank himself to death a year later. He told her about how he had drifted from town to town, working as a ranch hand and a scout and eventually a lawman, always looking for something he could not quite name. And Helena told him about her childhood in Galveston, about her parents who had been kind but poor, about the orphanage where she had learned to sew and cook and keep her head down. She told him about the parade of jobs she had worked, the towns she had passed through, the men who had propositioned her, and the women who had looked at her with pity or contempt. She told him about the loneliness that had become so familiar it felt like a part of her, and the way she had learned to stop hoping for anything better. "I do not want you to feel that way anymore," Asher said one night as they sat side by side at the mouth of the cave, watching the stars. "I want you to hope again, Helena. I want you to believe that good things can happen." "I am trying," Helena said softly. "You make me want to try." He took her hand and laced his fingers through hers. "When this is over, when the mayor is in prison and you are safe, will you stay with me? I know it is fast, and I know we barely know each other, but I have never felt this way about anyone before. I look at you and I see my future. I see a home and a family and all the things I thought I would never have. Is that crazy?" "It is completely crazy," Helena said, but she was smiling. "But I see the same things when I look at you. I see a life I never dared to imagine. So yes, Asher. When this is over, I will stay with you. I will build that future with you. I will be yours if you will be mine." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and they lay back on his bedroll and made love under the stars, their bodies moving together in a rhythm as old as time. It was Helena's first time, and Asher was gentle and patient, murmuring words of love and reassurance against her skin. When it was over, they held each other close, and Helena felt a peace she had never known before. She had found her home, and it was not a place. It was a person. On the 4th day, they saw riders approaching from town. Asher grabbed his rifle and pulled Helena back into the cave, but as the riders drew closer, he relaxed. "It is the marshals," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I recognize the badges." They climbed down from the cave and met the riders at the base of the trail. There were 4 of them, hard-faced men with the look of men who had seen too much. The leader was a tall man with a thick gray beard and eyes like chips of ice. "Asher Cole?" he asked. "That is me," Asher said. "Thank you for coming, Marshal." "Marshal Henry Garrett," the man said, dismounting. "We got your telegram. You said you had evidence of fraud and murder." "I do," Asher said, and pulled the documents from his saddlebag. "And I have a witness who can testify to how the mayor stole land from Mexican families. Her name is Rosa Delgado, and she lives in Terlingua." Marshal Garrett studied the documents carefully, his expression growing darker with every page. "This is damning," he said finally. "If this is all legitimate, Mayor Hutchins is going to hang." "It is legitimate," Asher said, "and there is more. He murdered my partner, Thomas Mercer, because Thomas was investigating him. Miss Morgan witnessed the murder." Marshal Garrett looked at Helena. "Is that true, miss?" "Yes, sir," Helena said. "I saw the mayor's brother shoot him in the alley behind the saloon. And then they tried to kill me to keep me quiet." The marshal nodded slowly. "All right. We will ride into town and arrest the mayor and anyone else involved. You two stay here until we send word that it is safe." "No," Asher said firmly. "I am coming with you. I owe it to Thomas." "And I am coming too," Helena said. "I am tired of hiding." Marshal Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but something in their faces must have convinced him, because he just sighed and said, "Fine. But you stay behind us, and if there is shooting, you get down and stay down. Understood?" They rode back into Terlingua in the late afternoon, the 6 of them making an imposing sight as they entered the main street. People stopped and stared, and Helena saw more than a few frightened faces. The mayor's reign of terror had lasted a long time, and the townspeople had learned to be afraid. Marshal Garrett led them straight to the mayor's office, a fancy building with a painted sign and glass windows. He dismounted and walked inside without knocking, and Helena heard him say in a voice that carried, "Mayor Hutchins, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, and murder." There was a crash and the sound of shouting, and then the mayor came stumbling out of the building, his face red with fury. "You cannot do this. I am the mayor of this town. You have no authority here." "I have all the authority I need," Marshal Garrett said, pulling out a set of handcuffs. "And you are coming with me, whether you like it or not." The mayor's eyes landed on Helena, and his face twisted with rage. "This is her fault, that lying little whore. She made it all up." "Watch your mouth," Asher said, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped forward, his hand on his gun, and the mayor actually took a step back. "I will see you hang for this," the mayor spat. "The only one who is going to hang is you," Marshal Garrett said calmly, and snapped the cuffs on the mayor's wrists. "Boys, round up the brother and anyone else involved. We are taking them all in." It took another hour to gather up all of the mayor's men, but eventually they were all in custody, hands bound and faces sullen. The townspeople had gathered in the street, watching in stunned silence, and then someone started to clap. It was Rosa, standing in the front of the crowd with her husband and children. Others joined in, and soon the whole street was filled with applause and cheers. Helena felt tears streaming down her face, and Asher put his arm around her, pulling her close. "It is over," he said softly. "You are safe now." Marshal Garrett approached them. "We will need both of you to come to El Paso to testify at the trial. But after that, you are free to go wherever you want. The mayor's assets will be seized and sold, and the money will be used to compensate his victims. With any luck, Rosa and the other families will get their land back." "Thank you, Marshal," Asher said. They stayed in Terlingua for another week. helping Marshal Garrett gather evidence and prepare for the trial. The townspeople, once they realized that Helena and Asher were heroes rather than troublemakers, could not do enough for them. The hotel gave them rooms for free, the restaurant owner sent them meals, and people stopped them on the street to shake their hands and thank them. On the last day before they were to leave for El Paso, Rosa came to see them. She brought a beautiful embroidered shawl for Helena and a pair of leather gloves for Asher. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her eyes bright with tears. "Because of you, my family will have our land back. My children will grow up on the land their great-grandfather bought. You have given us our lives back. You were the brave one," Helena said, hugging her. "You told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent." "We were all brave together," Rosa said, "and that is what made the difference." The trial in El Paso lasted 3 days. Helena and Rosa both testified, and the documents Asher had found were entered into evidence. The mayor's lawyer tried to discredit them, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury returned a guilty verdict after less than an hour of deliberation. Mayor Hutchins was sentenced to hang for murder and to serve 20 years for fraud and extortion. His brother and the other men involved received similar sentences. When it was over, Asher and Helena stood on the steps of the courthouse, blinking in the bright sunlight. "Where do we go now?" Helena asked. Asher took her hand. "Wherever we want. I have some money saved, enough to buy a small ranch. Maybe in Colorado, near where I grew up. We could raise horses and cattle, build a life together. What do you think?" Helena looked up at him, at this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. "I think that sounds like a dream come true." "I told you," Asher said, grinning. "I am your exception." They were married a week later in a small church in El Paso, with Rosa and her family as witnesses. Helena wore a simple white dress that Rosa had embroidered with flowers, and Asher wore his best suit. The priest was a kind old man who smiled throughout the ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Asher kissed Helena so thoroughly that Rosa's children giggled. They spent their wedding night in a hotel room that overlooked the Rio Grande, and Asher made love to his wife with a tenderness that made her cry. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, and Helena traced the scars on his chest with her fingertips. "Tell me something," she said. "That first day when you saw me hiding behind the water trough, what made you decide to help me?" Asher was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I do not know. I just looked at you and something inside me said, this woman is important. This woman is going to change your life, and I was right." "You changed my life too," Helena said. "Before I met you, I was just existing, just going through the motions. But you made me feel alive again. You made me believe in possibilities." "Good," Asher said, kissing her forehead. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life giving you reasons to believe." They left El Paso the next morning and began the long journey to Colorado. It took them 2 weeks, traveling by stage and train and finally on horseback for the last leg of the journey. When they finally arrived at the small valley where Asher wanted to build their ranch, Helena understood why he had chosen it. It was beautiful in a wild, rugged way, with towering mountains in the distance and a clear stream running through the meadow. There were stands of pine and aspen, and the grass was thick and green. It was the kind of place where a person could breathe, could start fresh, could build a life without fear. They bought 200 acres from a man who was moving his family east, and they spent the next year building their home with their own hands. It was hard work, but it was good work, and every nail Helena hammered and every log Asher lifted felt like a promise they were making to each other and to their future. Their house was small but sturdy, with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft upstairs. They built a barn for the horses and a chicken coop for the hens Helena insisted on getting. Asher taught her to ride properly, and she taught him to cook more than just beans and hardtack. They worked from sunrise to sunset, and they fell into bed every night exhausted and happy. On their first anniversary, Asher gave Helena a beautiful mare with a white blaze on her forehead. "Her name is Hope," he said, "because that is what you gave me." Helena laughed and cried at the same time and threw her arms around his neck. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," Asher said. "We have the rest of our lives to figure this out together." A few months later, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Asher one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. Then he set her down very carefully and said, "Wait, should I not have done that? Is it safe? What if I hurt the baby?" Helena laughed at his panicked expression. "The baby is fine, Asher. I am fine, better than fine. I am happy." Their son was born the following spring, a healthy boy with Asher's blue-green eyes and Helena's stubborn chin. They named him Thomas, after the man whose death had brought them together, and they promised each other that they would raise him to be brave and kind and good. Thomas was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Rose, after Rosa, who had been so brave in Terlingua. And 2 years after that, another son they named Daniel. The house that had once seemed so spacious now rang with children's laughter and the sound of small feet running across the wooden floors. Helena sometimes thought back to that day in Terlingua, to the moment when she had been hiding behind the water trough, certain she was going to die. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person. She was not that frightened, lonely woman anymore. She was a wife and a mother, a ranch owner, a woman who knew how to ride and shoot and deliver a calf. She was loved and cherished, and every morning when she woke up next to Asher, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Asher had his own moments of reflection. Sometimes, when he was out riding the fence line or breaking a new horse, he would think about Thomas and the sacrifice he had made. He wished his friend could have lived to see what his death had brought about. Justice for the people of Terlingua, a new life for Asher, and a family that would not have existed without that terrible catalyst. He made sure to tell his children about Uncle Thomas, about his bravery and his dedication to doing what was right, and he hoped that those lessons would sink in. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered, and they expanded their herd and bought more land. They became pillars of their small community, known for their fairness and generosity. Helena opened a small school in their home for the children of the nearby ranches, teaching them reading and arithmetic. Asher served as a volunteer deputy when the sheriff needed help, using his skills to keep the peace without resorting to violence whenever possible. When Thomas was 10, Rose was 8, and Daniel was 6, they received a letter from Rosa. She wrote that her husband had passed away from the lung disease he had contracted in the mines, but that her children were grown and doing well. Her eldest son was managing the family land, and it was profitable again. She wanted them to know that she prayed for them every day and that she would never forget what they had done for her family. Helena cried when she read the letter, and Asher held her close. "She has had a hard life," Helena said. "I wish we could do more for her." "We did what we could," Asher said gently. "We gave her back her dignity and her land. That is no small thing. And look at what we built together, Helena. Look at our children and our home and this life we have created. We turned something terrible into something beautiful. That is what matters." Helena nodded and wiped her eyes. He was right, as he so often was. They had taken the worst moment of their lives and transformed it into a love story, a family, a legacy. When Thomas turned 18, he announced that he wanted to study law. "I want to help people the way you and Mother helped those families in Terlingua," he said. "I want to make sure that powerful people cannot hurt those who are weaker." Asher felt pride swelling in his chest so strongly it almost hurt. "That is a fine ambition, son. Your mother and I will support you however we can." They sent Thomas to Denver to study, and though Helena cried the day he left, she was also fiercely proud. Rose proved to have a gift for healing, and she began apprenticing with the local doctor when she was 16. Daniel, the baby of the family, had inherited his father's way with horses and announced that he intended to stay on the ranch and expand the breeding program. On their 20th anniversary, Asher and Helena took a trip back to Terlingua. They had not been back since the trial, and they were curious to see how the town had changed. What they found surprised them. Terlingua had grown and prospered in the years since the mayor's arrest. The mines were still operating, but now they were run fairly, with proper wages and safety measures. The Mexican families who had been displaced had mostly returned, and the town had a vibrant, diverse community. They visited Rosa's family and were welcomed like royalty. Rosa's eldest son, who now ran the family land, insisted on throwing them a feast, and it seemed like the whole town turned out to meet the legendary couple who had brought down the corrupt mayor. Helena was embarrassed by all the attention, but Asher just grinned and told stories and charmed everyone he met. On their last night in Terlingua, they walked to the alley where Thomas Mercer had died. Someone had put up a small memorial there, a simple wooden cross with his name carved into it. Asher stood there for a long moment, his hand resting on the weathered wood. "I kept my promise, Thomas," he said quietly. "I made them pay for what they did to you, and I found something I never expected to find. I found love and purpose and a reason to be better than I was. I hope, wherever you are, you know that your death was not in vain." Helena took his hand and squeezed it, and they stood there together in the fading light, honoring the memory of a man they both owed so much. They returned to Colorado, to their ranch and their children and their life, and the years continued to roll by in a steady, peaceful rhythm. There were hard times, of course. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick animals and difficult harvests. There were arguments and misunderstandings, moments of frustration and fear. But through it all, they had each other, and that made all the difference. When Asher turned 50, his hair had gone silver at the temples, and he had lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. Helena, at 46, still had the same hazel eyes that had captured his heart, though her brown hair now had threads of gray running through it. They had grown old together, and every new wrinkle and gray hair was a testament to the life they had built. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done 1,000 times before, Helena said, "Do you remember what I told you the night we met? I told you that dreams do not come true." "I remember," Asher said, pulling her close. "And I told you to let me be your exception." "You were," Helena said softly. "You were my exception, Asher. You took a woman who had given up on everything good and beautiful and showed her that life could be full of love and joy. You gave me a home and a family and a future I never dared to imagine. You made me believe in dreams again." "You did the same for me," Asher said, kissing her temple. "I was drifting, Helena. I had no direction, no purpose. And then I saw you, brave and scared and so damn stubborn, and everything clicked into place. You became my North Star, the thing I oriented my whole life around. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." They sat there in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. From inside the house, they could hear Daniel talking to the horses in the barn, his voice low and soothing. Rose was visiting from town, where she now worked as a midwife, and she was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Thomas had written to say he would be home for Christmas, bringing with him the young woman he was courting. The ranch that had once been just a dream was now a thriving reality, with 100 head of cattle, 24 horses, and fields of hay and oats. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, and there were now several outbuildings and a bunkhouse for the seasonal hands they hired during busy times. But more than the physical structures and the material success, what they had built was a legacy of love and integrity. Their children had grown up knowing they were cherished, knowing that their parents had fought for justice and built something meaningful out of tragedy. They had learned the value of hard work and honesty, the importance of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Asher said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Helena asked. "About how that day in Terlingua when I decided to help you was the best decision I ever made. I did not know you. I did not know what it would cost me or where it would lead, but I listened to my gut, and my gut told me you were worth saving, and I was right. You were worth saving, Helena. You were worth everything." Helena felt tears prickling at her eyes. Even after all these years, Asher still had the ability to make her feel like the most precious thing in the world. "You saved me in more ways than you know. I was drowning, Asher. I was so lost and alone, and I had convinced myself that was all I would ever be. And then you appeared, like something out of a storybook, and you refused to let me give up. You fought for me when I did not have the strength to fight for myself. And then you loved me so completely that I learned to love myself again." "We saved each other," Asher said firmly. "That is what love does. It makes us better than we were, stronger than we thought we could be, and it gives us a reason to keep going even when everything seems impossible." They were quiet again, and then Helena said, "Do you think the children understand how lucky we are? How rare it is to find what we have?" "I think Thomas does," Asher said thoughtfully. "He has your romantic heart, and Rose understands the value of commitment and partnership. I see it in the way she talks about the families she helps. As for Daniel, he is still young, but I have faith he will figure it out when the time is right. I want them to be as happy as we have been," Helena said. "I want them to find partners who challenge them and cherish them and make them laugh even on the hard days." "They will," Asher said confidently. "We raised them right. We showed them what a good marriage looks like. The rest is up to them and to fate." Rose called them in for dinner, and they went inside to the warm, lamp-lit kitchen where their daughter had laid out a simple but delicious meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. As they ate, Rose told them about the babies she had delivered that week and the young couple who had come to her for advice about starting a family. Daniel talked about the new colt that had been born that morning and how he thought it had real potential as a cutting horse. After dinner, they all sat together in the front room, and Asher played the fiddle he had learned to play years ago, while Helena and Rose sang and Daniel tapped his foot in time with the music. It was a simple evening, the kind they had had countless times before, but it was perfect in its ordinariness. This was what they had built, not just a ranch or a family, but a life filled with love and laughter and connection. When Rose and Daniel had gone to bed, Asher and Helena climbed the stairs to their own room. Asher helped Helena out of her dress, his fingers gentle on the buttons, and she helped him with his boots. They had done this dance so many times over the years that it was second nature now, a comfortable ritual that spoke of deep intimacy and trust. They lay down together in the bed they had shared for 20 years, and Asher pulled Helena close, her head resting on his shoulder. "I love you," he said as he did every night. "More than words can say." "I love you too," Helena replied as she always did, forever and always. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found in each other the home they had always been searching for. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas graduated from law school and opened a practice in Denver, where he quickly made a name for himself defending miners and farmers against powerful corporations. He married a smart, spirited woman named Catherine, and they had 3 children who visited the ranch every summer. Rose married the doctor she had been apprenticing with, a kind man who adored her, and they opened a clinic together that served families from all over the territory. Daniel, true to his word, stayed on the ranch and eventually took over the day-to-day operations when Asher's joints started to ache too much for the hard physical labor. When Asher was 65 and Helena was 61, they decided it was time to slow down. They turned the ranch over to Daniel, who ran it with the same integrity and care that his parents had, and they built themselves a small cottage on the edge of the property where they could spend their days in peace. Helena took up painting, discovering a talent she had never known she had, and Asher spent his time carving wooden toys for his growing number of grandchildren. They took long walks together, moving slower now but still hand in hand, and they spent their evenings reading to each other by the fire. On their 40th anniversary, their children threw them a party that drew friends and family from across Colorado and beyond. There were over 100 people there, all of them touched in some way by the love and generosity that Asher and Helena had shown over the years. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, and through it all, Asher and Helena sat together, holding hands and marveling at the community they had built. Thomas stood up to give a toast, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "When I was a boy, my father told me the story of how he met my mother, how he saw her in danger and did not hesitate to help her, even though it meant putting his own life at risk, how they fought together against injustice and built a life out of ashes and hope. I grew up thinking that story was exceptional, that my parents were somehow different from everyone else. But as I have gotten older, I have come to understand that what made them exceptional was not that they fell in love or that they faced hardship. It was that they chose, every single day, to keep loving each other. They chose to be kind and patient and forgiving. They chose to build each other up instead of tearing each other down. They chose to be partners in the truest sense of the word, and that is the legacy they have given us. Not just a successful ranch or financial security, but the knowledge that love is a choice we make every day, and that when we choose it consistently, it can create something truly beautiful. So here is to Asher and Helena Cole, the 2 people who taught us all what it means to love well. May we all be so lucky as to find what you have found." There was not a dry eye in the room as Thomas finished, and Asher stood up slowly, his arm around Helena's shoulders. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you to all of you for being part of our lives, for enriching our journey, for loving our children and our grandchildren. Helena and I have been blessed beyond measure, and we know it. We know how rare and precious this life we have built is. And we want you all to know that it started with a choice. I chose to help a stranger in trouble and she chose to trust me. And every day since then, we have kept choosing each other. That is the secret if there is one. Just keep choosing love. Keep choosing kindness. Keep choosing to believe that tomorrow can be better than today, and miracles will happen." The party went on late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. But eventually, as the stars wheeled overhead and the fire burned down to embers, the guests began to drift away, back to their homes and their own lives. Asher and Helena walked slowly back to their cottage, tired but happy, their hearts full. "That was quite a speech our son gave," Helena said as they got ready for bed. "He is a good man," Asher said proudly. "They all are, We did all right with them, did not we? We did more than all right, Helena said. We raised them to be good and true and brave. We gave them roots and wings. What more could parents ask for? They climbed into bed, and Helena rested her head on Asher's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was slower than it used to be, not quite as strong, but it was still there, still keeping time for her. Asher, she said softly. Yes, love. Do you have any regrets? Looking back on your life, is there anything you wish you had done differently? Asher was quiet for a moment, thinking. No, he said finally. I do not have any regrets. There are things I wish had been easier, times I wish I had been wiser or kinder or braver. But I would not change the path that led me to you. I would not change the life we have built together. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear or doubt was worth it because it brought me here to this moment, with you in my arms and our family thriving around us. So no, Helena. I have no regrets. Neither do I, Helena whispered. You were my exception, Asher Cole. You proved me wrong about everything I thought I knew about the world, and I will be grateful for that until my dying day. And beyond, Asher said, kissing the top of her head. I will love you beyond my dying day, Helena, into whatever comes next, forever. They fell asleep like that, two souls so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The seasons turned and the years passed, and slowly but inevitably, Asher and Helena grew older. Asher's hair went completely white, and he developed a stoop in his shoulders that no amount of stretching could cure. Helena's hands became gnarled with arthritis, making it difficult to hold a paintbrush, but she adapted, finding new ways to create the art that brought her so much joy. They faced each new challenge with the same partnership that had defined their marriage from the beginning. When Asher had a bad spell with his heart, Helena nursed him back to health with fierce determination. When Helena's eyesight began to fail, Asher read to her for hours every day, his voice still strong and clear even if his body was not. They were each other's support and comfort, and they faced the reality of aging with grace and humor. On a crisp autumn morning when Asher was 73 and Helena was 69, they took a walk together along the stream that ran through their property. The aspen trees were turning gold, and the air had that sharp, clean quality that only comes in the fall. They walked slowly, Asher leaning on a cane and Helena holding his free arm, and they did not talk much. They did not need to. After so many years together, they could communicate in silence, in glances and touches and the simple comfort of each other's presence. They stopped at a place where the stream widened into a small pool, and they sat down on a flat rock that had been their favorite spot for decades. Helena leaned her head on Asher's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they watched the water flow past, glittering in the morning sun. "This is where I want my ashes scattered," Helena said suddenly. Asher looked down at her, surprised. "Helena, that is a morbid thing to say on such a beautiful morning." "It is not morbid," Helena said calmly. "It is practical. I am not going to live forever, Asher, and neither are you. And I want you to know that when my time comes, I want to be here, in this place that has been so important to us. I want to become part of the land we loved, the water we drank, the air our children breathed. Is that so terrible?" "No," Asher said, his voice thick. "It is not terrible. It is beautiful, and I want the same thing. When my time comes, I want to be here with you, part of this place we built together." "Good," Helena said, and they sat in silence for a while longer, each lost in their own thoughts. That winter was a hard one, with heavy snows and bitter cold. Asher developed a cough that would not go away, and despite Helena's best efforts and the doctor's medicines, he grew weaker. By the time spring arrived, it was clear that he did not have much time left. The children gathered at the ranch, bringing their own children and filling the house with noise and life. Asher held court from his bed, telling stories and dispensing advice and making terrible jokes that made everyone groan and laugh. He was lucid and calm, accepting his fate with the same steady courage he had shown his whole life. On a soft May evening, with the windows open to let in the scent of new grass and wildflowers, Asher called Helena to his side. The children had gone to give them privacy, though they stayed close, waiting. "Helena," Asher said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My beautiful Helena, thank you for the life we had together. Thank you for loving me and believing in me and making me better than I ever could have been alone. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Helena was crying, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "You were my exception, Asher. You were my dream come true, and I will carry you in my heart every day until we are together again." "I will be waiting for you," Asher promised. "On the other side, wherever that is, I will be waiting, so do not be afraid, and do not rush to join me. You stay here with our children and our grandchildren, and you live every moment as fully as you can. You paint and you laugh and you tell them stories about me. You live, Helena. Promise me." "I promise," Helena said, though it felt like her heart was breaking into a million pieces. Asher smiled then, that same beautiful smile that had captured her heart 41 years ago. "I love you," he said. "Forever and always." "I love you too," Helena whispered, and she held his hand as he took his last breath, as his spirit left his worn-out body and went wherever spirits go when they are finished with this world. The funeral was held on a bright, clear day, and it seemed like half of Colorado turned out to pay their respects. Asher had touched so many lives over the years, had helped so many people, and now they came to honor him and to support the family he had loved so well. His ashes were scattered in the stream, just as he had wanted, and as Helena watched them disappear into the water, she felt a strange sense of peace. He was part of this place now, part of the land and the water and the wind, and in a way, that meant he would always be with her. Helena lived for another 7 years after Asher died. She moved back into the main house with Daniel and his family, and she spent her days surrounded by the laughter of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She painted when her hands allowed it, and she told stories about Asher until everyone knew them by heart. She was not lonely, not exactly, but there was a piece of her that was always waiting, always ready to be reunited with the man she had loved more than life itself. On a warm summer afternoon when she was 76, Helena felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She was sitting on the porch, watching her great-grandchildren play in the yard, and she knew with sudden clarity that her time had come. She was not afraid. She was ready. She called Rose to her side and said, "It is time, darling. I'm going to go be with your father now." Rose tried to argue, tried to call for the doctor, but Helena shook her head. "No, it is all right. I have had a good life, a beautiful life, and I am ready for it to be over. Just sit with me, will you? Hold my hand and sit with me." So Rose sat with her mother, holding her hand, and Helena's other children and many of her grandchildren gathered around. She looked at each of them in turn, her eyes full of love and pride, and she said, "You are all my greatest joy. You are the legacy your father and I leave behind. Be good to each other. Love each other. And remember that dreams do come true if you are brave enough to fight for them." And then, with her family surrounding her and the sun warm on her face, Helena Morgan Cole closed her eyes and let go. Her ashes joined Asher's in the stream, and the two of them became part of the land they had loved, forever intertwined, forever together. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management and eventually passed to his children and then to their children. The story of Asher and Helena became a legend in the family, told and retold to each new generation. The cottage they had built was preserved as a kind of shrine, filled with Helena's paintings and Asher's carvings, and the simple furniture they had used every day. Thomas's grandchildren grew up to be lawyers and judges, carrying on the tradition of fighting for justice that their great-grandfather had started. Rose's descendants became doctors and nurses and healers, helping people just as she had done. And Daniel's line produced ranchers and horse trainers, people who understood the value of hard work and the importance of treating the land with respect. But more than any profession or accomplishment, what the family remembered and honored was the love story at the heart of it all. The story of a cowboy who saw a woman in trouble and decided to help, even though he did not know her. The story of a woman who had given up on dreams and found a man who made her believe again. The story of two people who chose each other every single day and built a life that rippled out to touch generations. Years later, when Thomas's great-great-granddaughter was researching the family history for a school project, she found an old journal that had belonged to Helena. In it, written in faded ink on yellowing pages, was an entry from that first week in the cave, when Helena and Asher had been hiding from the mayor's men. It read, "I told him that dreams do not come true, that life is hard and cruel and there is no room for fairy tales. And he looked at me with those incredible eyes and said, 'Let me be your exception.' I did not believe him then. I thought he was naive or foolish or both, but I am starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe there is room in this hard world for kindness and love. Maybe dreams can come true if you find the right person to share them with. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I do not know if we will survive this. But I know that I am glad I met Asher Cole. I am glad he chose to help me. And if we do survive, if we make it through this, I think I would like to spend the rest of my life proving him right. I think I would like to let him be my exception." The girl read those words and felt tears in her eyes. She looked at the painting hanging on the wall, a portrait Helena had done of Asher in his later years, and she understood in that moment the power of love, the way it could transform not just two lives but countless lives down through the generations. She understood that her own existence was a direct result of a choice made on a dusty street in Terlingua, Texas, in 1882. A choice to help, a choice to trust, a choice to love, and she thought that maybe, when her time came, she would be brave enough to make the same kind of choices. She would be brave enough to believe in dreams and to fight for them. She would be brave enough to let someone be her exception, because that was the real legacy of Asher and Helena Cole. Not the ranch or the money or the family name, but the example they had set. The proof that even in the hardest times, even in the wildest and most dangerous places, love could flourish. Dreams could come true. And two people, if they were brave enough and stubborn enough and kind enough, could build something that would last forever. The stream still flows through that valley in Colorado, crystal clear and cold, carrying within it the ashes of two people who loved each other more than words can say. And if you stand there on a quiet morning and listen carefully, some say you can still hear it. The echo of laughter, the whisper of promises, the sound of two hearts beating as one. The sound of a dream that came true, against all odds because one man was brave enough to say, "Let me be your exception," and one woman was brave enough to believe him.